Hi friends, here are 4 of my favorite antioxidant and protein-rich healthy desserts and how you can make them. The first one will be a strawberry lemon parfait. The second one will be a lemon Cara mousse. The third one will be a chocolate blackberry mini-sicles. And the fourth one will be a chocolate blackberry parfait. So the base of these ingredients are going to be the same. It takes less than 10 minutes to make. You will need a block of firm tofu that you rinse, and you can just throw that in the blender. Add to that some soft pitted dates. It probably takes about 8 medjool dates to sweeten a block of tofu. You will also need the zest of 1 lemon. You can add that to your ingredients and then add the juice of 1 lemon. Include a cup of your favorite plant-based milk. Now in the blender, combine all these ingredients and blend well. In the end, you will have a creamy pudding texture. This is edible as is. It's delicious by itself. Now to give your puddings more antioxidant power and a yellow tinge, add half a teaspoon of turmeric. Now I'm going to go over how to zest the lemon and the benefits of lemon zest and lemon essential oils a little later. At this point, taste your creation and add more lemon zest if you want it to be more refreshing. Add more tofu if you want it to be creamier, milk if you want to be thinner, and dates if you want it to be sweeter. For the strawberry lemon parfait, you will need fresh strawberries and some walnuts. You can cut up the strawberries however you like. I just slice them in the shape of this. And I put strawberries on the bottom and then a scoop of the pudding on top and then another layer of strawberries and then another layer of pudding. And finally, I sprinkled some crushed red walnuts. Now you can use a bowl or a tall glass container and top it off with the strawberry if that's all you have. For the Cara mousse, you will need Cara oranges peeled and cut up in cubes and deshelled unsalted roasted pistachios. If you want, you can zest the Cara rind and put that in your pudding as well. Now these oranges, they don't have to look pretty because you will be burying them under the pudding. So I lined the bottom of the container with oranges and then I covered it up with a layer of pudding. I saved 3 circular slices of the oranges from the middle of the orange to decorate the top. The center of the orange has the largest diameter so that it gives you more flexibility to work with. So I basically sliced a circle on one side the length of the radius so that I could tug it on opposite ends to make this S-shaped decoration. Then I sprinkled unsalted roasted pistachios on top. I actually brought this dessert to my church fellowship last week and I didn't tell them how I made it. They all knew it was a healthy dessert because it's something that I would eat. And it was really fun watching them trying to guess the ingredients. No one could guess it was actually made out of tofu until I revealed it. For the chocolate blackberry pudding, add cocoa powder to your pudding base. I added about 3 tablespoons of unsweetened cocoa powder. You can add more or less depending on your taste preference. Now, in addition to a block of tofu, I added a 1/4 cup of blackberries to give the pudding that purplish color. Now, to make the mini-sicles, I just put them in ice cube trays. Now, I did this because I can pre-make these desserts and I don't have to spend every day making new desserts. Plus, this forces me to portion size so that I don't overeat sweet treats. Now, I have noticed that the more sweets I eat that's processed, the more I want to eat sweets. And this is why I prefer to eat whole fruit for my treats. Now to make the blackberry parfait, line your container with blackberries and then add a layer of pudding and then use your blackberries for decoration. Okay, so let me show you how to zest a lemon if you've never done it before. I don't have the safest grater, so if you've never worked with a grater before, you really should invest in one, and with your hands will never get close to the grater. I've had this grater for over 20 years and I've had a lot of practice grating food since I was a kid, so I'm just too cheap to upgrade my grater. But I don't let my kids use it. So the outside of the rind of the lemon is what you want. You really don't want the entire peel because the peel is bitter. It's edible, but it's pretty bitter. So if you like that taste, you can just put the whole peel in. But I personally don't like that taste, and I know a lot of people don't. If you put your finger in the lemon, you'll notice that it's going to come out with some oil. It's pretty fragrant. When I do that, I can smell the fragrance. Okay, so you know the oil is coming out when you can smell the fragrance. And when you do that with a lemon or an orange, you're actually getting the essential oils out. This is how companies purify and concentrate lemon essential oils from the rind, either through cold pressing, like what I just did. All I'm doing is pressing on it, and I can totally smell the aroma of a lemon, or steam extraction. And many companies, they use lemon or other citrus essential oils like lime, oranges, grapefruit as fragrances in soaps, detergents, creams, lotions, and perfumes because they smell great. But you should know that they are all phototoxic. So a typical essential oil has terpenes, terpenoids, flavonoids, and aromatic compounds. These are fancy chemical terms to label volatile organic solvents or oils, meaning that these oils are so tiny that they float away in the air. And that's why when you squeeze a lemon or you peel an orange, you can smell that aroma all the way across the room. Now, there are several applications of essential oil, and each plant is different. Each plant part is different. Essential oils have been studied for chronic and acute pain relief, for nausea and vomiting relief, to improve mood disorders, improve sleep quality, improve memory, and other inflammatory conditions. It's widely used in the food industry, actually as a natural way to preserve processed foods. But just because they are all natural and can kill bacteria doesn't mean that there aren't side effects. And it's really important that if you're going to use any product, be it natural or artificial, that you do your homework so you understand the risks as well as the benefits of what you're using. And this includes food. So the benefits of the recipe that I am sharing you today are abundant. One block of tofu has 35 grams of protein. The entire block costs less than $2.50. Soy milk per cup is another 7 grams of protein. And so far, just with these two ingredients, the entire pudding has 430 calories. And it would be very challenging to eat this whole pudding in one setting. So far, this is a low-calorie food. However, one medjool date has 66 calories. So 5 of these dates is 532 calories. And just by adding these dates, the pudding now has more than doubled in calories. And now it's at almost 1,000 calories, which is almost half of the amount of calories I should be eating in a day. So when I make desserts, I intend for these desserts to actually replace some of my food in my regular meals. Otherwise, if I just add on these calories on top of what I normally eat, then I will be in a calorie surplus and I'll start to gain weight unless I increase my activity. So even though this is a relatively healthy dessert, I'm still very aware that by adding the dates, I'm adding more sugar. And the more sugar that I eat, the more sugary foods I tend to seek. I'm actually a recovering sugar addict. I grew up surrounded by sugary junk food. My mom rewarded me with Certs candy and Freshen Up gum whenever I cleaned the house, and she would buy C's candy every holiday. On top of that, I drank 7-Up, occasionally Coke and Pepsi. We had cherry ice cream in the fridge, Twinkies in my lunch bag, and sugary breakfast cereal every morning with prizes on the bottom and donuts on the weekends. And almost every month, she would make angel food cake. Do you know how hard it is to beat eggs manually for that cake? We did not have a blender, so everything was by hand. The thing is, my parents, they didn't know any better, and they believed that there is no way that the US government would allow anything toxic to be sold to their people. They didn't actually eat all these things, but they provided these things for us, for my siblings and I, and we would happily eat all of it. My parents believed that the key to health was diversity, as well as portion control. And even the World Health Organization tells us to eat a diversity of foods so that you can have a diversity of nutrients and not collect toxins in any one particular food that you're eating. The thing is, you can't apply this concept to processed foods because the foods that we were actually eating aren't real food. They taste pretty good, they're chemically created, and they have incomplete nourishment. My mom thought 7-Up was better because it was full of water. And I think we all understand now that just because something has some parts that are good doesn't mean it's actually good for us to eat. She thought C's candy was healthy because it had nuts. Her ice cream always was cherry because cherry was healthy for me. And angel food cake, well, that's just full of eggs. So how can that be unhealthy? And breakfast cereals, that had vitamins. That couldn't be that bad. Now, I can't really explain Twinkies. I think she just bought it because I nagged her about it. And that's the problem with processed foods. Many processed foods have some ingredients that are healthy, but they are filled with so many more additives and ingredients that aren't healthy. And oftentimes they may start with something healthy, but really they stripped out all the critical health components of whatever was healthy. So take flour, for instance, and that flour started as a wheat berry. Then the seed is stripped of its fiber, is stripped of its germs, so all that is left is highly caloric starch. And in case you didn't realize, starch is one step away from being simple sugar, glucose. It's essentially a chain of glucose molecules, and your enzymes can easily digest that starting with your mouth. The enzyme is called amylase. And if you eat it pre-digested, like in powdered form, then you will more quickly digest it. And then your insulin will go up, which is meant to be to counteract the sugar. But when your insulin spikes up, you pack on fat. faster. Have you ever unwrapped a present and realized your wrapping paper was just too small? I've done that several times. And my choice was either to start all over and get a new sheet of paper or just to patch it. And it just doesn't look right when you patch it. That's powdered food. Once you've powdered it like flour, it's never going to be the same again. You can never put it back to its original form. And therefore, the chemistry of metabolism is totally different in your body. Now, we can try to glue it back, right? Glue it in the shape of a kernel, but you're never going to get the husk back because they took it out, or the wheat germ because they took that out. And by taking those things out, by destroying that fiber matrix, we have a processed food that makes bread, cakes, pastries, candies. It is really an addiction component for us to stuff other stuff like salt, sugar, and fat. Ironically, it says it's all natural, but there's nothing natural about processed food. And it's okay to eat a little bit of it, but if we're trying to hit a health goal like losing weight or getting insulin sensitive, then it cannot be predominantly the majority of your food. The thing is, these things build up their tax on your health over time. So eating one serving isn't really going to do much, right? It's eating the serving all day long with every meal and every snacks that really accumulate and tax our health. Therefore, if you're trying to gain weight, then processing food is a great way to gain weight. And this is why supplemental shakes are given to people who need to gain some weight. And the other problem is that we have totally misunderstood carbohydrates and their role in our health. So there are different types of carbohydrates and they act differently in our body. The chemistry is all different. The food industry has done a great job to confuse everyone to the point that you may believe their processed foods are healthy and that all natural foods like a piece of fruit is unhealthy. I have never eaten a processed apple that comes close to the taste and texture of a real apple. And a real apple has very different health benefits than any form of processed apple. However, I have been addicted to many different forms of processed apples, from apple juice, apple chips, apple bars, apple pies, and apple candy. These are all quote unquote foods that actually promote inflammation and shorten people's lifespan, makes people more insulin resistant, and helps people to pack on weight faster. One general rule is that when your food can be easily swallowed without chewing, such as drinking shakes or swallowing puddings, then you've actually bypassed the benefit of chewing. And chewing actually can help you feel full. And the reason why it's so hard to quit sugar is because you were born hardwired to love sugar. And that's why commercials, restaurants, coffee shops, gas stations, and supermarkets, they're all trying to sell it to you. Show me a food company that doesn't sell some form of sugar or use sugar in their foods, and they'll probably go out of business. Sugar sells, and every government supports the sugar industry because it's very profitable, and that's why there's sugar in everything. So the deck is stacked against you to quit sugar. You are surrounded by it. So am I. Everything that's sugary is colorful. It has wonderful other flavors, be it artificial or natural, and it has textures that all reinforce this addiction. And then they put salt, they add fat. You got yourself a recipe for success. And many parents, including myself at one time, we're all essentially working for the sugar industry for free. And whether you know it or not, if you cook with sugar, you are a sugar scientist, making all different kinds of sugary products in all different textures and shapes. And you're training future customers, the children, to associate sugar with happiness. And it's really the one industry that doesn't need any commercials. Now, every year we celebrate sugar during Halloween, and we think that's a cute thing to do, right? We pass it out at churches, at schools, we celebrate anniversaries and birthdays, and we eat sugar in every meal, either hidden in healthy foods or unhealthy drinks or in sauces, snacks, and desserts for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I challenge you to find a children's sports event that doesn't give them sugar during the game and immediately after the game. I am not extreme. I don't have 100% no sugar in my diet. Sometimes the little bit of sugar lets me eat something even healthier. And I think that's okay. So if you use a little bit of sugar, like a little teaspoon to sweeten up your vegetables, that's perfectly fine. It's when we are baking with it, putting cups of sugar, that's the problem, right? And so I know some people really are a stickler. They don't want any sugar in their food. And that's pretty much impossible to do if you eat any carbohydrates. All your carbs will be turned into sugar. When we eat digestible carbohydrates like starches, they're turned to sugar. There's nothing wrong with that. We just have to know how much to eat, when to stop, and to really try to eat that in unprocessed forms. And it's really the added sugar that we have to control. In fact, each American adult eats about 60 pounds of added sugar a year. That's 6 bowling balls worth of sugar. And big business knows how to lure you and your kids to buy their food because your brain is wired to seek sugary foods for survival since sugar gives you quick energy. And in our pudding that we made today, there's plenty of sugar in dates, but it's all trapped in fiber. Each date has 1.6 grams of fiber. The whole fruit also has fiber, and 1 cup of strawberries has 7 grams of sugar and 3 grams of fiber. 1 cup of Cara oranges has 14 grams of sugar and 3 grams of fiber. And 1 cup of blackberries has 7 grams of sugar and 8 grams of fiber. And if you ate a whole cup of dates, that would be eating 113 grams of sugar and 14 grams of fiber. But when you eat a cup of table sugar, you're eating 200 grams of sugar and 774 calories, and there's no fiber, there's no protein, there's no vitamins, there's no minerals, and there's no phytonutrients. Now, if you keep the dates whole, it obviously would be better than having to blend it up. And by keeping it whole, you delay the absorption of sugar as your body has to digest through all that fiber to get to it. But when you add other ultra-processed sweeteners, whether it's table sugar or maple syrup or honey, that affects your body differently since there's no fiber. These simple sugars, they give you quick energy. And it's really the complex sugars that give you slow, sustained energy. And it is true. In the end, all these absorbable sugars, even the complex sugars, can get converted to simple sugars. And this is why the trick to eating sugar is to find sugar encased in fiber. And this is why I use whole dates and not date syrup and not granulated sugar or honey or maple syrup. I personally made it a rule not to eat sugar without it being encased in fiber. And this is referring to real food, right? This is how I got myself unaddicted to sugary foods. And when you eat whole foods, even if they have some sugar, they have so many other ingredients that are excellent for your health and metabolism that counteract the dopamine surges that you get from thinking about sugar and then tasting sugar on your tongue, swallowing that sugar and digesting that sugar in your intestines. All these pathways send more signals back to your brain to release dopamine so that you can go and get more sugar. And at one point, I was like Pavlov's dogs. And so everything I ate and drank had to taste sweet. And I even trained myself to drink diet soda. I was seeking like Asian sweetbreads, cinnamon bagels, and sugared up dry fruit. This was my diet as a young adult in college. And I didn't think anything was wrong because I wasn't overweight. And everybody else ate worse food. But I struggled with massive allergy attacks, eczema, and mental fatigue. And luckily, I was a good sleeper and I protected my sleep. And I was also very disciplined in studying. But physically, I am now in better shape than I ever was in my youth. Many people are like me, and they're hopelessly searching for healthy, single ingredient sugar substitutes. And I did that at one time. You're never going to find it, nor will you cure an addiction by finding another addiction. Fake sugars, sugar substitutes, non-nutritive sweeteners, and other processed sugars continue to drive sugar addiction. And this is where it gets complex because there's so many names for processed sugars. Honey, cane sugar, brown sugar, maple syrup, date syrup, brown rice sugar, beet sugar, high fructose corn syrup. Yeah, they all sound all natural and are made from plants, but they aren't real food. Did you know that morphine and cyanide are extracted from plants too? Just because it's found in nature doesn't mean that it's good for us to eat it. And to add more confusion, complex carbohydrates like flour, even though they don't taste sweet, they're just as bad as processed sugar. In fact, your body easily breaks them down into the sugar glucose. And powdered food, that's a great way to hide worse things like salt, fat, and artificial ingredients. And when you add sugar to sugar, basically sweet to flour, to make pretty fluffy items like donuts, cakes, muffins, buns, breads, cereals, and bagels, you got yourself some addictive energy bombs. Now, occasionally eating this is probably okay. But if this is your diet every day, this is a recipe for sickness and really the root cause of the standard American diet, the SAD diet. Now, a trick that I used to dampen the sugar reward pathway was to pair bitter foods with sour foods, like the lemon that I put in this pudding. This can tone down the addictive reward chemicals that sugar triggers. Bitter and sour foods, they naturally activate the aversion pathways in the brain, and this will counteract those high spikes of immediate dopamine rise after eating processed carbohydrates. Now, the fiber from plants, whether it's from a salad, a bowl of beans, or whole fruit, They buffer your absorption of the processed sugar to avoid triggering those high hormonal spikes like rising insulins that can wreak more metabolic havoc and cause weight gain in your body. So remember, when you process fruits, you will destroy the protective fiber casing that prevents the activation of addictive pathways and protects your metabolism from the rapid action of digestive enzymes. This is why I avoid eating sugar unless it's in a natural whole food fiber. And if you know you're prone to be addicted to sugar, then it's best to keep your carbs unprocessed. Try to eat whole foods, avoid blending or eating food made from powders like flour. But I understand this can't be done overnight, and it's really a gradual process. It's a new lifestyle. It's a new you. So you have to be patient in giving yourself that time to train yourself to a new habit. Because if you do it right, you will liberate yourself from sugar. And this is why I paired whole fruit with this pudding. And the layers are not flour in between. And you can easily put this pudding in between cake, and that could be a cream to make it a healthier cake. But if that cake is made out of traditional flour, then you're just going to perpetuate the addiction of sugar. But when you eat something that is low calorie, like a whole orange, whole strawberries, or whole blackberries, the water will first fill you up. The anthocyanins will inhibit your digestive enzymes to slow down the rate of absorption of the sugars, and the soluble fibers will feed your gut microbiome to promote microbes that digest complex carbohydrates like the fiber and inhibit the microbes that digest simple sugars like table sugar that feeds your addiction and fat cells. So you're not just training your palate when you change your food and when you eat this dessert, you're also training your gut microbiome, which is the largest immune organ in your body. By keeping your fruit raw, you maximize absorption of their vitamins, their minerals, their fiber, and phytonutrients. And contrary to what you may be hearing on social media, fruit is actually good for diabetics. Whole fruits are low in calories, they're full of water, and they're low in fat, and they have a tough fibrous casings to slow the release of its carbohydrates and feed your gut microbiome to reduce inflammation. But if you're eating high-fat foods like dairy and meat, you will have high blood sugars after you eat fruit because the fat in the dairy and the meat and the amino acids make you more insulin resistant. And people confuse the symptoms of diabetes, which is sugar intolerance, to the cause of diabetes, which are from saturated fats and the wrong types of amino acids. So you can accumulate fats by overeating calories or just directly eating them in processed foods. There are so many processed low carbohydrate keto-friendly junk foods on the market, and these foods use fake sugar to perpetuate your desire to eat sugar. And then they fill it up with fat and protein, two nutrients that really don't taste good by themselves and actually sabotage your sugar metabolism. But the problem is, every time you think about sugar, you still secrete hormones, and you secrete more hormones if you taste that flavor. And even though you're eating 0-calorie sweeteners, your metabolism is still anticipating the sugar that never shows up. And this is really confusing and such a letdown for your body that your body ends up overcompensating at the next real meal. And in addition, it's been shown that if people think they're eating less calories, they're actually going to eat more calories. And it's hard to lose weight eating diet chemicals. Really, some of these snacks aren't even low in carbohydrates. And if you read the ingredients, you will know it's processed food because you'll see flour and sugar as the first and second ingredient. These ingredients you will never find in nature. Even if you ground your grain to powder, it would still have all of its nutrients and fiber, unlike bread flour and sugar. Now, if you're eating a high protein, low carb diet, it may sound like a good idea because you don't see the sugar spikes, and you can't because you're not eating any sugar. And even people with type 1 diabetes who don't make insulin, if you didn't give them any carbohydrates, they also would not have abnormal sugars. That was literally the prescription to treat type 1 diabetes 100 years ago before insulin was discovered. These patients were all instructed to eat a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet to survive. And if they didn't do that, they would go into a life-threatening condition called diabetic ketoacidosis. And you can tell when someone is in this condition or in ketosis because their breath smells fruity like nail polish remover. If you smell that and if you have diabetes, you should really need to see a doctor ASAP. Sugar substitutes, they just don't disturb your metabolism, but they also disturb your gut microbiome. Many of them can destroy your gut microbiome, as good bacteria may not be able to digest them either. And some of these substitutes come with cancer warning labels like aspartame. And you know when you're addicted when you will happily eat something that potentially causes harm. Now you may be wondering how long it'll take to train your palate to give up sugar. Well, there are several factors that determine this that is not related to taste, but your emotions. For example, you may not like broccoli because your parents forced you to eat it, which has nothing to do with taste. I know people who don't eat the foods that they ate during chemotherapy because it gives them bad memories. And it's well known that people seek certain foods when they are emotionally stressed for comfort. Now, if you put your emotions aside, it will take a few weeks to train your palate. But if you know you are an emotional eater, you may want to consider getting some help. If you want to jumpstart the biological process, eat the fresh fruits first before you eat the pudding, as the pudding may be sweeter than the fruit, or just make sure that you're eating it together. Eating this dessert can actually help you reduce all forms of processed sugar. When your taste buds reset, then if you try processed sugary foods again, you will not enjoy them as much and you will notice that you need a lot less sugar to satisfy your sweet tooth. Now, if you want other ideas on how to replace sugar, check out the next video.